Welcome to the Book Binge. I am your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and today I gotta be completely honest with you and saying that this is not a video that I ever thought I would make. Firstly, because I usually tend not to make videos of this sort, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna read this thing, now here's my expectations. You know, I've only done that a couple of times, maybe only one time up to this point, but so, you know, normally I don't do this kind of thing. The second reason why I didn't think this was a video I'd make is because I never thought I would ever be touching Discworld by Terry Pratchett for a number of reasons over a number of years. But over the course of like 4.5 years, my mind has been changed. And so that makes a pretty good starting point for this video. What were my reservations about reading Discworld in the past? Well, I'm sure that any Discworld fan has probably heard all of these before. And probably if you were somebody who has hitherto not read the series like me, you probably also have maybe used some of these reasons for yourself in the past. Discworld has a little bit of a reputation amongst relatively more ignorant folk of being a pretty humor-first series, and so if you're somebody who's not into British humor, you probably just kind of assume that Discworld is not going to be for you. I mean, I'm sure there are books where that's more true than not here, where the humor is a little bit more of the focus. I have seen that a little bit more basically firsthand, right? I'm also quite aware that the books are quite amusing at points, even the more serious ones. And the books being very satire forward, that is the thing that gets confused a little bit, means that humor is definitely going to be a part of that. But what I think is forgotten is that humor and satire aren't necessarily the same thing, and certainly satire doesn't always have to be humorous. That's kind of how we understand it to be nowadays, but it doesn't have to be that. So I think that many people, including me, get caught in this sort of mind trap of, oh, the excerpts that people post from random Discworld books aren't funny, so clearly the humor isn't clicking with me, therefore I probably wouldn't enjoy the books. You know, that's maybe an unfair way to view things, obviously. Like, quotes that people post out of context never being enticing is certainly a valid take, because that was my experience with it, you know, a handful of years ago whenever I saw those kinds of things. And it would definitely put me off a little bit more if the person who posted those excerpts out of context, I might add, would think that they were genuinely the most meaningful or hilarious thing that they had ever posted, but never really connected to me. I think that many other people have had that experience like me over the years. But after long enough, I just kind of unfairly determined that Pratchett wouldn't be for me on account of some of these things, you know? It was definitely a little bit short-sighted, it was obviously a little bit silly, but that begs the question. If I'm giving Discworld a shot and I'm planning to start reading it next month, what changed? Well, to view the walls breaking down in a particular way, let's just say that I have, there have been many moments over the years that have left me wondering about the series a little bit, generally speaking. One of those things that has left me wondering is that I have many friends who love Discworld. So, you know, I've kind of been predisposed to this general context outside of, like, my own little echo chamber. Not really an echo chamber, to be fair, but whenever other people would post stuff, and there would be plenty of people on my side who were like, why are we posting this? It's not amusing, it doesn't really mean anything, what are we doing here? And just kind of be put off by it. I've spent more time over the last handful of years, more time over the last couple of years specifically, more focused on my time spent with closer friends in a smaller private Discord server where it is very book forward. And the fact that a lot of those friends do really like Discworld means that I've been predisposed to a slightly more positive reception of the series, and also something that's a little bit more realistic about the reception of the series compared to the random out of context excerpts that might get posted elsewhere. There's also the factor that, like, I like Monty Python a lot, for example. So clearly British humor isn't necessarily inherently something that I don't click with. It was just me assuming that British humor might not be for me in a written context because I didn't connect with any of the Pratchett quotes that I had ever seen. But is that really fair? Not really. So I've been able to disconnect myself from that particular take, for example. Between these couple of things, I was just never really sure that Discworld would never actually be for me. So over the last few years, I've wondered a little bit more. I have, considered it a little bit more. There was a particular event a couple of Christmases ago where I once reshared a meme that I thought was great with regards to death. It was a death meme at Christmas time, something about gifting swords to children, for example. If you probably know, I'm sure plenty of people who did not know this meme was from, based on something from Discord or Discworld, sorry, probably didn't realize, like me, I didn't realize that it was from Discworld, but one of my buddies, Reen, pointed out to me that that meme was Discworld, and that death specifically as a character, a recurring character within some of the Discworld novels, might specifically be for me. So that was the moment when my walls started to break down, was when that meme was like actually really good. Like, I really liked that. And when Reen told me that it was from Discworld, I was like, is it really now? And he was like, yeah. So I was like, okay, maybe Discworld isn't not for me. Maybe I'm just being a closed-minded fool. So I got to thinking a little bit more about it. But seriously, all things considered, 40 plus books is an insane prospect. Even if I were to read one Discworld book every single month, that would be like 4 years. I read too slow to do that. Why would I subject myself to that? But then I realized these books are pretty short. Like, even the longer ones are barely 400 to 500 pages, right? And many of them are only in the 300 to 400 page limit. And a lot of the early series is pretty short, especially, the first handful of books. Some of these don't even reach 300 pages. So when you consider that the books are really short and that a lot of them are basically standalone, I was like, you know what? Maybe it would be worth giving Discworld a shot. Maybe not committing to read the whole thing, because that would also probably be pretty stupid, just like writing off the entire thing, but maybe I should give it a shot. Reading Discworld sporadically, for example, is totally an option to take, and that was something that I considered trying to do. But then somewhere in mid-2024, I want to say it was, I was talking with Reen about Discworld more specifically, and I decided that I was willing to try it out, and we were kind of like discussing over the ways in which trying it out would be useful to me. Like, what does that actually mean in my particular context? He and some other of my friends decided to just end up gifting me the first 15 books for some reason. They are insane people, but I love them to death. Like, you see all the books that I have all the way over to there? All of those, plus the 6 that I have on my desk right now? Yeah, those were all Christmas, I think a Christmas gift, maybe a birthday gift, I forget. They were a gift to me from my friends who collectively decided to gift them to me. So thank you to all of those people who did that. But anyway, I promised in receiving the books that I would at least try the series out, because if they gifted me 15 entire books, I should at least give the series an honest shot. Like, it would be very rude of me to not do that. So here I am, making do finally on that promise, since 2025 was too insane to even try doing that, and it wasn't a great reading year, and I did not get very much read last year. 2026 is a little bit more up to speed, and at the beginning of the year was when I committed, I'm going to read 6 books this year. So let's talk about the reading order and schedule, because this is going to be a pretty hot topic. If you've seen the books that I'm holding up, in the thumbnail and also at multiple points of the video so far, there are probably a lot of Discworld fans that are freaking out a little bit. That is because in order to address Discworld reading order, the only way to talk about this is to say that it's a pretty touchy subject amongst fans, and that is because people have all manners of various starting points that they recommend for people. There are various different places that are good starting points for different people, depending on your proclivities, many things along these lines. Most importantly, however, amongst all of the various different recommendations that people have with regard to sub-series, starting points, all blah, 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 people very often say don't read Discworld in publication order, because that is a mistake, because the first few books are the weakest and they're not necessarily the most representative of the series writ large, so just don't do that. Unfortunately for all of you guys, I'm going to be going with publication order for simplicity's sake, but don't worry, don't freak out. Before you type your comments, I can hear your keyboards clackling down there. I'm not doing this in a like, oh, I'll just try The Color of Magic and then see how I feel after that. No, I have committed. I said this in multiple videos at this point, and I've promised basically all of my friends, I am reading at least 4 Discworld books this year, preferably 6. This year in 2026. That is happening. If nothing else happens this year, this is happening. I've made that promise. I've made that commitment. It is going to happen. So, with all that being said, I also want to make clear that even though I am planning to read the first 6 Discworld books in publication order, and even though people are probably freaking out about that because of the first few of them, to be very clear, I have discussed this with Reen in depth. This is a discussion we've had multiple times, multiple points. Like, genuinely, we have talked about this a lot, actually. Reen being a very, very big fan of the series. I think he's read the entire series more than once. I think he's read it all twice, maybe even more for several of those books in there. He's a big Pratchett fan. So, you know, it's not like I'm just talking to some random Yahoo. I'm talking about somebody who genuinely really adores the series, and is mostly just really happy that I'm willing to give it a shot at all in the first place. But we have had this discussion about reading order and all that kind of stuff. He has expressed that publication order is perfectly fine way to read Discworld, as long as people like kind of know what they're getting into, right? And he has made sure I know what I'm getting into, so it's not like I'm just flying blind here. I'm genuinely not. But as a rule, Reen also tends not to inherently discourage reading in publication order because, well, publication order is publication order generally for a reason, right? He's not one of those hardline, he'll always read everything in publication order no matter what type of people, but he does tend to lean that direction. And I also tend to lean that direction for simplicity's sake, and that's part of what I'm doing with Discworld. Like I said before, it is largely simplicity's sake that I want to read this in publication order, because if I try to determine any other order for myself, I'm going to go crazy, and it'll generally lead to me not actually committing to reading any of the books, which I think is worse than me just plowing through the first handful of books back to back, essentially. So, like I said, there's all of that. Reen and I have discussed it. Another thing that we have discussed is that he finds, personally, the commentary around the idea of Discworld sub-series to be generally pretty pedantic, and the way that a lot of fans get into that, at least to him, as another big fan, he tends to think of it as being a little bit overboard. And that a lot of fans tend to like scare away or generally put off potential readers more so than they do anything else when they get into hyper specifics about the sub-series and other reading orders along those lines. So in that sense, reading publication order is a lot simpler and a lot easier. So in that way, since he thinks that the sub-series debate is pretty pedantic and that the sub-series were never like written to be sub-series specifically, not in the way that something like Realm of the Elderlings is, he thinks that leaning hard upon the different sub-series and the different monikers of some of that is just a little bit short-sighted in the context of the entire series as well. Finally, this is something else that I've discussed many times on the channel, is that Reen is very good at setting expectations for me with my tastes and my proclivities, and doing so very honestly. And it tends to work out quite well. Even in cases where I've not particularly clicked with something he has recommended to me, he has been honest about that and has known in a couple of cases that I might not be super into something. It turned out I wasn't super into that thing, but that's okay. Like, he set the expectations very well. It's not self-fulfilling prophecy kind of way. It's just he's very good at knowing where my tastes are at, generally speaking, and where something that I try will fall into that, especially if he knows a lot about it. Discworld is one of these cases. So, in short, with regard to this section, I have a pretty good idea of what I'm getting into, and I have committed to these 6 books. Like I said, at least 4 of them this year, probably all 6 of them this year, and this will be a monthly affair for those 4 to 6 books that I read this year. That means that my plans look a little bit like this. The Color of Magic I will read in May. This will be coming up here very shortly on the channel. The Light Fantastic will be in June. Equal Rights in July. Mort in August. Sorcery in September, and then Weird Sisters in October. October. So that is my current reading order and schedule for now, and how I react to those 6 books will determine what my pace potentially continuing the series in 2027 looks like, because I think my reading schedule for the end of the year, between catching up on things, other random stuff, it might be better for me to just say I'll read these 6 books this year, and then whatever I potentially read in the future with the series will be based off of how I react to these particular books and the discussions that I have with my friends, most especially Reen, as a result of them, and will also be determined after I get to that point, because I'll want to know how I feel about these 6 before I continue on, because if I react in certain ways to these 6 books and Reen thinks that there's a particular book or 2 later in the series that I should try just to, like, just to be sure or something like that, then that's a discussion that we'll have later. But generally speaking, that is where I am at. So let's talk very briefly here at the end of this video with regard to my expectations for Discworld. I have adjusted. I have taken a step back. I'm looking at this as objectively and blankly as possible. My expectation slate is essentially clean, and it is clean in a very beautiful kind of way, rather than a there's literally nothing there kind of way. So I'm expecting a little bit less along the lines of humor, like I always interpreted the series as being, probably incorrectly, and I'm expecting more in the vein of satire, and understanding that satire isn't always just humor. Sometimes satire is very serious. So being a little bit more honest about my expectations with regard to that side of things is a good thing for me. That is where my expectations are there. It's definitely something that's going to feel a little bit pedantic, but those things are distinct from one another, so that is how I feel there. I also don't expect to love Discworld. That's the other thing that I tend to go into with books. I try to go in with a blank slate, in the sense of, maybe I enjoy this, maybe I don't, we'll just see what happens. That's the way that I go into books, and I basically never go into a book expecting to hate it, or thinking that I will hate it, or expecting to love it, or thinking I will love it. I try to do that as little as possible for obvious reasons, and doing so with Discworld means that I may very well come out of these books absolutely loving them. A good example along these lines is earlier this year, another one of Reen's favorite books, another one of his favorite authors. I read Hard-Boiled Wonderland and the End of the World by Haruki Murakami. He had no idea how I'd actually react to that book. He was kind of worried that I would dislike it. But I came out of that book with my book of the year and one of my favorite books that I've ever read, period. And part of the reason why that happened was because I went in having a general knowledge of what the book was based off of what Reen had told me, without spoilers, mind you, just having an idea of what that experience would probably be like, generally speaking, and then going in with a blank expectation, just like, okay, this is what it's going to be. Let's see how I react to it. That's what I expect to happen with Discworld. Whether I love it, whether I hate it, depends entirely on the actual quality of the books, in my opinion. So that is what things look like there. More specifically, I don't expect for the series to really properly click for me, just based off of various of the different things I've heard and the things that Reen and I have talked about. I expect for Mort to be when things actually start to bump up and really click for me a little bit more actively. Generally speaking, however, I have, like I said, blanked out my expectations. I don't have stupid preconceptions about the series anymore. I don't have any dumb notions of hatred ahead of time going into it, and I also have no expectations of this suddenly being a new favorite that might leave me disappointed. I'm just going to go in, they're reasoned out, based off of discussions that I've had, they're generally flat. What I experience is what I experience, and how I react to them is how I react to them, but I will be reading these 6 books this year. So next month in May, I officially dive into Discworld for the first time. What do you guys think I'll think of the series as I work through it? If you're somebody who has watched the channel for a while and you've read Discworld, you can take a proper guess at what you think I will think of these first 6 books. I would love to hear that in the comments for any regular viewers at this point. That would be pretty interesting. Do you think I'll love it? Do you think I'll hate it? Are there any particular things you think I will get out of it? Or any particular reactions that I might have based off of what you've seen of me and what you know of the books? Like I said, I'd be very interested to hear about it. Let me know all of those thoughts in the comments below. I will obviously review each one of these entries as I read them every month, and I'm considering potentially doing some manner of spoiler diaries for these, like maybe one spoiler talk for each book so that I can talk a little bit more specific reactions beyond just a spoiler-free review. I haven't fully committed to that, but, you know, if I do, that might be fun. But in either case, you know, that's what things look like. If nothing else, I'm ready to be along for the ride with the series for at least the next half of a year. If anybody else watching this video wants to reread any of Discworld with me, or wants to give it a shot for the first time with me, you are always free to do so. Come hang out. I would really appreciate it. If there were people who were willing to jump on something like that, I would be interested in doing some of those spoiler discussions on a couple of the books now and again, just to, you know, kind of talk about some of those things with other potential new readers. That could be something that might be fun. You know, let me know if you're interested in doing that. But for now, I've been your host, King Crusoe. You can call me KC, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.